Hello there and welcome. Today we're going to continue working on our trivia game. We are almost done and what we have left is creating the options menu. So we are going to open our options scene and I'm going to provide you a link for the UI in the description. You simply drag it and import it into your project. You are going to get 2 scripts and 1 prefab. So import. We're going to create a canvas, so UI canvas, and we're going to set the settings over here, scale with screen size. And now we're going to drag our prefab. It probably got inserted into the scenes folder. So we're going to simply drag it and make it a child of the canvas. If it looks weird and not like that, it's just because you need to stretch it. So click on the prefab, click over here, hold Alt and click over here. But it should be already stretched and you should see it this way. Of course, you can also take this out of the scenes folder and drag it into the imports just to be organized. But of course, we don't need this as a prefab, so we can unpack it like that. Now, if we click on our options screen, make sure that it has the master volume controller attached and that the slider is also attached. If this is not attached, you can simply find it over here, volume area and slider, and then simply drag the slider into the slot. This component basically controls the master volume of the entire app. So for example, we want to change all of our different sounds, we can change this value and it will change all the sounds volume together. Okay, so we don't need to go one by one, and we can use this for our options master volume. Obviously, you can add more options. You can have just music volume or maybe effects volume, and you can really separate this into different kinds of sounds, but we're going to keep it simple. We're simply going to have a master volume slider that we can change. Another thing that we're going to have is a button to change the username. So if the user decided that he wants to change his name, he can simply click over here and input a different name, and it will replace the name that he had inside the player pref. And of course, if you don't see these sprites over here on the buttons, for example, these are just sprites that we are using from the Sweet UI pack, and I showed you how you can download this in the first episodes. It's for free, but if you don't have this, it will probably be missing. You also need to have this font, so I'm not sure that you have this font as a default, but of course this is just an option. You can have your own UI. Now, if we click on our slider, we can see that it has these 2 events that are invoked when the value is changed. So if we click and we drag this slider, then both of these events will happen. It will basically call both of these methods. So it's going to update the actual UI and it's also going to update the master volume. So we can see this inside the volume slider script. So both of these methods are going to be called when we change the value. And this one basically sets the master volume by using the value of the slider. So if we change the value to 50%, then it's going to set the master volume to 50. And if we go inside, we can see that it simply changes the audio listener volume. So it doesn't matter on which audio source or channel we play the sound, it will change the sound for the entire app. And over here inside the update slider UI, we're simply rounding the text, the value, and we're showing it over here. So you can see 100. And if we change this, it's going to get updated as well. So this is just some logic so you understand how it works. And of course, we have a reference to the master volume controller over here and a reference to this text over here. Now, if we go and click on the options screen, we can see the master volume controller over here. But what if we start in our main menu scene, right? Because this is the options scene. How will it load the master volume when we start the app if we don't have this master volume controller in the main menu as well. So for this, we're going to create this kind of controller in the main menu as well, so it can load the master volume when we start the app. So main menu, and inside the main menu scene, we're simply going to create a master volume controller and add our master volume script on it. And we don't actually need to provide a reference to the slider because the code will simply ignore it, right? Over here in the main menu, we have no reason and no way to change the volume. We don't need any kind of slider interaction, so we don't need to provide this reference. We still need this component, so when we start the app, it will load the master volume, and this way we can use the volume that was saved. Now we also want to add the logic to actually be able to input a new name. So to do this, we're going to create some kind of settings manager or options manager. Inside, we're going to have several references. Let's also import the UI package so we can use these buttons, and we can see now this namespace over here. So we have references to the submit name button, and also when we actually input the name, we are going to be able to click on the submit button and it will save the name. Then we have a text field inside of the input field, and we also have a reference to the entire screen for the input, and we're going to see how it looks, and also a bool to know if we're changing the name, because we don't want to be able to go back to the main menu if we're in the middle of changing the name. So inside the update method, we're going to add the code to be able to go back to the previous menu. So we're checking if the player is pressing on the back button, which is escape. So it's not really escape on mobile, it's the back button. And also if we're not in the middle of changing the name, only then we can go back to the main menu. Now inside the start method, we also want to set the on-click listeners. And we're going to create both of these methods, so generate method and generate method. So when we click on the change username button, this will happen, this will be called, and when we click on the submit one, this will be called. So inside the handle name change, we are going to set the is changing name to true. So now we are in the middle of changing the name, and we also want to actually display the screen for the input. And over here inside the handle submit, we want to submit the name. So string new user name input field text. So we take the text that we inputted, and then if it's not empty, then we're going to simply set the name of the user, and we know that this basically sets it into the player pref because we already did this before. And then we're going to set the bool to false because we finished setting the name, and also we want to hide this screen. Now we save the script and we're going to add all of these references. So for the change username button, it means that it's this one. So we're going to expand and take, see, where is it? This button over here, right? So it's this button. We're going to drag it. And we also have the submit name button, and this is actually inside of the screen, but it's disabled. So we're going to enable it. So this is how it's going to look. It's the same screen that we had when we first start the app and the user needs to input the name. So I simply duplicated this entire screen. So we need this button and we also need this input field. So we're simply going to drag the submit button over here. And for the name input field, we're going to take this input field, or actually it should be a text. So this text over here. Then for the change name screen, we need this entire thing. Now, of course, when we exit and go back to the main menu, we want to save the master volume, the changes. So over here, before we go back, we also want to save it. So we need to add a reference to the controller. And over here, before we change the scene, we are going to save master volume, and it's going to save it into the player pref. So then when we start the app again, it's going to be saved. And of course, we need to add this reference. So we can find this on our actual option screen, right? Because the option screen has this master controller. And now we're going to save and see that everything is working. Let's go back to the main menu scene. Now, when we start the app, don't worry if you don't hear anything. This is not a bug. This is just the way player pref is working. If we go into our master volume controller, we basically save the player pref. But if we want to load the player pref, it will check for this key, okay? And then it will get the value. But if this doesn't exist, so if we never saved the volume in our app, in our device, it will return a default value, okay? So it will return some kind of default value, usually it's 0 or 1, and that's why when we start the app for the first time, we're not going to hear anything, because if we go to the options, we can see that it's at 0. Now if we increase it, we can see that it actually works. And if we set it to, let's say, 50 or 49 and go back, and then go back again, it will be saved. Now, if we close the app and then start again, it will still be on 49 because we are saving it into the player pref. Now it's too loud, so let's just make it a bit quieter. And also we can change the name. If you remember, the name that is saved is Mike. You can basically also add some kind of text over here that is saying welcome Mike or something like that, and then you simply take the value out of the player pref and show it over here so we can know what is the name of the user. But if you want to change the name of the user, you can simply click over here and put a new name, and it will save the new name. And now when we start new games and we play, it will send the new name to the database, but because we still have the old ID, it will not override the data. It will simply change the username, but it will keep the score. So if we have some kind of high score, we are still going to have it. We are not going to lose it. Now at this point, there is a small adjustment that I want to do with the singleton, because if we actually run the game and let's say we go to the options menu, the options scene, and then we go back to the main menu, we're going to have 2 copies of the sound manager and 2 copies of the user manager. Now you can ask, how is this possible? And that's just because we are not destroying the singleton. And then we go back to the main menu, and there is already another instance of the user manager or the sound manager. So usually we use this when we don't go back to the previous scene, but because we always change scenes in our app, this is not the best approach. So we need to do some kind of modification for our singleton, okay? And the change is that we're simply going to check first if this instance already exists, and if another instance that is not this instance exists, then we're going to destroy it. Otherwise, we're going to keep it. So we need to change it a bit over here. then we're going to destroy the instance or the game object, it doesn't matter. Else, the instance is this, and also don't destroy this one. Okay, so we also need to do this to the sound manager and basically every singleton that we don't want to get destroyed. Of course, the other singletons don't need this because we do destroy them. So if we go, for example, let's say to the UI manager, we don't care if another one exists because we are not keeping it, right? We are not saying that it should not be destroyed. So if we go to a new scene and it already exists, then we're not going to care because this one will only be relevant for one scene, okay? So the only ones that we care about are the user manager and the sound manager, and this way we're not going to have a problem. And now if we run the game, we can see that we have all of these singletons over here, right? But if we go to the options menu, we still have them. And then if we go back to the main menu, we still only have 4 and we don't have the ones that were already here, right? So they're not duplicated. And for example, it will not cause us thing like duplicated code or even playing the same music twice, okay? So if you had a problem with the music playing twice, it's because you had 2 singletons, but now we only have 1 copy of each singleton. So that's a small fix. And that's basically all for the options menu. Obviously, you can add more options. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed. It will also keep you updated when new content comes out, and it will also support me a lot. You can also leave a like for the algorithm, and I'll see you in the next episode.